I'm Angela and this is my channel Upcycled Artistry. If you love to upcycle pre-loved textiles, including old clothes, into things that you absolutely adore, also into jewellery and sometimes into textile art, then hit that subscribe button and the bell and follow my journey. Now, to make these Boro style shorts, I started with one very ugly pair of thrifted but new stretch shorts, and they were probably down to there with a little cuff. The trick to cycling with patching stretch jeans or stretch shorts is to buy them one size bigger, because when you add a lot of patches you do lose some of the stretch. There are 5 really easy steps to making a pair of Boro style shorts like these. The first step is to cut your shorts to the length that you want, and we will go over all of these steps. The second step is to bleach the shorts. The third step is to distress, and I'll talk about a few different ways you can distress. Then you have so much fun adding all of these patches. And then finally, the 5th step is to add some hand stitching. And in any of these, you can go back and maybe add a little bit more distressing or add a few more patches. These are your shorts and you make them the way you want. So my foolproof way of making sure that you always get the short length the way you like it, without that horrible riding up at the back, is to put them on. And you can see I've put these on the side, and can you see how the front on these ones dips down just a little bit, and they sit a little bit higher in the back on me. I've got a little bit of a dipped back, and so mine always sit a bit higher. But the important thing is that these are straight around here. They're not going up at the back. And when I say straight here, I mean straight on you or straight on your mannequin. If these were sitting flat on the side, this back section would come down just a little bit, and that's because we cut them in a way that allows room for your butt to sit nicely in your short. Now, to make these shorts the perfect length for you on the front and the back, you need to put them on first. And you are going to mark with ideally an erasable marker the length that you want, just on one pair of the shorts. Ideally you want to mark, and excuse me, you're going to mark right up under the crotch, sorry, where your 4 seams meet. You just go down, and in this case it's 3 centimeters. We'll need to know the length of that inside section. So in this case it's 3 centimeters is where I wanted that length to go. The second step is to, with your tape measure again, from that same inside seam area, is to measure, so you can have them off for this, you don't need to have them on. You need to measure the current length of your shorts. So this is the length of shorts before you cut them. And let's just pretend and say they were 18 centimeters. So we have 3 centimeters is the length we want from in here, and they're currently 18 centimeters. It's a simple subtraction of 18 centimeters minus 3 centimeters. So remember, in this case it was 15 centimeters. So now you can take the shorts or the jeans off and put them down on your bench. But you need to remember that 15 centimeters. You will measure from the bottom, not the top. We are going to measure from the bottom where your shorts or jeans already end. And we are going to measure up 15 centimeters, and we will mark 15 centimeters all the way around with an erasable pen, all the way around on both legs. And now that you've measured your cut marks, you're ready to cut. And the important thing with cutting is you are actually just cutting through a single piece of the leg at one time. You're not putting them together and cutting both sections of the leg. You are going all the way around and cutting the single piece of fabric. We're at step 2, which is to bleach the shorts. I use White King, which you can get in Australia, and it's liquid. It's not the gel bleaches that you can sometimes see. So do this in your sink, because you do need a bit of room. You don't want your shorts all scrunched up so that the bleach doesn't penetrate evenly. And I use 50% bleach and 50% water. Ideally, you should be wearing glasses and gloves when you do this, and do it in a well ventilated area. I tend to do a test run first. So you've chopped off some of your leg. I get just a small amount of my 50-50 solution and cut a piece of the leftover leg, pop it in, and I stand there and I watch it. So if it hasn't started to whiten, to change colour within about 2 minutes, you will need to add more bleach. It wouldn't be unusual for me to have my denim in my bleaching trough for a good 15 minutes. Once you're happy with the colour of your denim, and I will say with this one, I wasn't really 100% happy with the way that the denim bleached, but because I knew I was going to be covering a lot of it, it was less of an issue. So if you look closely, you can see lots of areas where it's paler there and darker there. And to start with, I didn't really like it, but now I actually think that's okay. The important thing is to stop it bleaching is to rinse it in plenty of running water. And I do that for about 5 minutes. And then I put the whole thing in my wash cycle with some detergent and I wash it dry and iron them, and then you're ready to go. I forgot to say that I did also cut off both of my back pockets. So you can see in this one I've cut the whole pocket off, but on this side I just cut the middle piece of the pocket and I've left these bits on the side here. My front pockets are still functional, which is important for me whenever I'm doing jeans or shorts. I use my front pockets quite a lot. To distress, there's lots of different ways of doing it, and you can use a Dremel if you have one. I will link a tutorial here where I used a Dremel to do an awful lot of distressing when I was making a Boro style pair of jeans. You can also use, this is a fish knife, but you could use, I think you guys call it a box knife. We call it a Stanley knife in Australia. And you simply do this. You can also use a rasp once you've used your Stanley knife to distress, but this one's dirty. I did make the mistake of using it once and I got a lot of gunk onto my shorts. So if you're going to use a rasp, just like your sewing scissors, have a pair that only you use. Important thing with the distressing is I always start where I've got layers of denim. So you have layers of denim on the fly, and I've just distressed one layer so you can see the second bit of denim underneath. And I do the same on these sections where the pockets are. Again, you can look here, I can pull that out and you can see that there's the denim, and in fact that's the pocket lining underneath. If you go too far, it doesn't matter, we can just poke a little patch in there and you can fix that. On these bar tabs, I've done exactly the same thing. I've just distressed this bit in the middle, and I've done the same things on that piece of the pocket that I've left behind. Now, I have also made some holes in these, and I will show you those. Let's see, I know I've got a hole down here somewhere. She says, here we go. I've simply made a hole there by distressing it quite a lot. Now, I could have patched behind it, but I didn't. I was quite happy to leave that. So what you're trying to do here is just distress it in a way that you like. You could have distressed quite a lot of the band because there's layers. As I've done here, there are layers underneath which show through. Here I have done some patching, and then I have distressed this a little bit more to show the patch underneath, and then I've done some stitching. So there really are no rules. Just a bit of a close-up of the distressed areas that I spoke about. So that's the band. There's one of the bar tabs that I've distressed a layer and then I've stitched through it. Let's have a look. There's a hole somewhere, right? There's a hole there that I've distressed. This is the fly area. Again, I've just put some little holes. This is the pocket, and you can see if I pull that out, there's the white lining underneath. I could easily pop a patch in there. I've just left it. There's some more sections where, again, on the pocket, I've just distressed. Another bar tab area. made a few little holes up here, done a little bit of distressing on the band, not very much. I did, here we go, I knew I wanted to have a bit of a distressed area on the bum, but I also patched behind it because this is the area that it will most frequently, I guess, split, because you know when you're sitting down you tend to stretch that out a bit. So that's a close-up of the distressed areas of the bit of the pocket that I left behind. So we're now going to talk about step 4, which is the patching and or making patches. So whenever I start a project like this, I always consider what the theme might be, if there is going to be one. In this case, it was a bit of an oriental theme. I always consider a colour scheme. This is blue-based neutral with a pop of red. And I also consider texture, and I've added texture here with the distressing, but I've also added texture with stitching and making some thicker patches. So let's just go over all of that. Let's first talk about the Oriental inspired theme. So you can see on this major patch on the back, pieces of a Japanese lady. That's all I had left, so that's what I've used. I haven't used the whole pieces because I put them onto something else. But I also added, I spoke about a pop of red. Pop is with this hand stitching that I've added everywhere, but also some of the other fabrics that I used had a little pop of red. Now on the front there's also there we go, little oriental lady. Now the rest of the fabrics are reasonably neutral. Some of them are patterned and lots of them are patterned, but many of them are also simply just plain and pieces of cotton that I have. This here, it's the top piece of a pocket, some more plains. This stripy stuff is just simply a light cotton. I've used a really light denim here, or denim along the bottom here. More oriental inspired fabric choices there, and again this is some Japanese fabric. I've continued the Japanese theme with, I guess, what I call a Boro style of patching, which is patching on patching with distressing and with lots of stitching to hold the patching down. And here is some Sashiko style stitching that I've used, again giving my pop of colour but reinforcing that sort of oriental Japanese theme. So how do I go about the patching? I always start on the bottom and I work my way up, and that helps me decide where I'm going to stop. Especially with jeans, you can have some challenges around your fly area and around your pockets. You're really lucky when you're doing shorts because you can sew, open them up on your sewing machine, sew from the top, but you can also sew from the bottom. You just need to be mindful of your pockets and not stitching everything together. Many of these patches are small pieces of fabric. It's like these small pieces of fabrics that I pick up from op shops or marketplace, and I keep them in colour combinations. So again, these are sort of blue themes. So lots of small pieces of fabric. They're sort of rectangles. Nothing's going to be a square. I tend to lay down my bigger patches first, and then I add the smaller ones over the top, but you can always go back in. What I wanted to show you that's a little bit different in these is this patch here. Most of it was made separately as a single patch, and by way of another example, what I mean by that is I've taken all of those fabrics and I've just put them on some other backing fabric and I've sewn them together to make one big patch. And in this case, I actually cut out a piece of the bum and then put this in and sewed around it. Whenever I'm patching, I always give 1 centimetre minimum of overlap. Things can move around, but also with denim, which is distressed and or bleached, sometimes over time things can wear a bit. So if you've got some overlapping, areas, it makes it much easier to repatch if you need to. The other thing that I did differently with the patching on these, and I'm going to bring the camera in so you can see. Can you see this sort of red bit here at the top? This patch was also made separately, and on the inside, can you see that is a handkerchief? So instead of patching onto a piece of denim, which would have been too heavy, I patched onto an old tea towel. Some people call them a dish towel. And then I also backed that with a really old light cotton handkerchief. It does pop out just a little bit. And then I simply patched over the top of it. Here's an example of what can happen over time. These shorts have been like this for 3 years. Can you see that this is sort of worn? And now what you can see is the patch underneath. So that's fantastic. I could have repatched that underneath, but all I did was sew another zigzag line down here, and that has anchored everything back in. So let's talk about the stitching. I zigzag these patches down individually. Now you can go around the side, each 4 sides of every patch if that's what you want to do. You don't really need to. So for the patch on top, I will go around the 4 sides, but for the patch underneath, I would have stopped here and stopped here because I'm not going to see that patch, and it is really well anchored down with the stitching on the other sides. When I'm doing the cutout patch, I do sew all the way around because you're anchoring such a large piece, you know, when you've cut out an area. But let's look at the smaller patches under there. Not all of them are sewn down all the way around with a zigzag. There's at least a zigzag on them somewhere. And some cases I did it with a straight stitch. And in fact, on this patch, now I look at it more closely, it looks like I've done vertical machine stitching. So I've done this when it wasn't attached to the jeans. I've done vertical machine stitching, and in a way it's given it a little bit of a quilted effect, and I really like that effect, especially around the writing. So zigzag everything down. It does help with fraying, and it does make, I think, the jeans more durable. So talk about the edges. So I have zigzagged around the bottom of my short, so I expect some fraying, and you can see that again. These are 3 years. Every now and then I just need to trim off the extra threads that hang around the bottom. So everything is zigzagged, and you haven't got any of those really super long threads hanging around. Let's look at this pocket. Again, it's the same process, but there's 3 different fabrics, 1, 2, and 3, and they've all been zigzagged down. You just need to be a bit mindful when you're sewing your pockets that you don't sew everything together. Let's have a look at hand stitching. So hand stitching is pretty much the last thing that I do. And in this case, I've used Sashiko thread, which is 100% cotton thread. Here's some red Sashiko thread. I have very deliberately added red as a pop colour. This is actually just a running stitch. I simply go all the way along, in, out, in, out, in, out as a straight running stitch. And then I tie off, come back and do those little top to bottom stitches to turn them into crosses. Some of my stitches are big, some of them are curvy. Sometimes I did French knots. Occasionally I used a different colour just to check it out, and if I didn't like it, I just didn't do any more of it. So I've used white, I've used blue, I've used green, and I've used red as my pop. Here is simply some straight red stitches, some white crosses, some white horizontal. As far as I could for the bottom bit, I did these curvy sort of straight stitches. Here in this case on the patch, I added some vertical red stitches just on one section. Here I added crosses. And I can tell you that I didn't have a plan. I simply started stitching. Again, some French knots, some really crappy stitches there. So this is the bit where you can do as much or as little as you want. So if you look at this patch, it's 3 pieces of fabric that have pretty much been zigzagged together, and then I've just added some hand stitching, and I didn't even complete the curve there. Now let's have a look at these bar tabs. So I like to draw attention to the distressing by having some little hand stitching on my bar tabs, and these again you can just see are crosses, and here's a little bit of stitching on part of the pocket. You don't need to stitch the whole thing, you obviously can if you want to. Sometimes what I do is I decide I've finished, I wear them for a few months, and then I just take them off and add a little bit more stitching. So that's the end of this video. If you like it, please give me a like and think about subscribing as well. Just have one final look. If you've got any comments, please leave them below. If you have any questions, I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.